We spend much of our lives trying to figure out who we are, as though this identity is a mystery locked away in a distant, hidden vault. It's common to think we must search the world for it, that somewhere out there through experiences, achievements, or relationships we will finally stumble upon the answer. But what if the truth is that the search itself is the distraction? What if the act of looking outward is what keeps us from realizing that everything we've been seeking has already been with us all along? You see, the very idea of searching for yourself assumes that you are incomplete, that there's something missing, and that only by going after it will you be whole. But is that really true? What if the problem isn't that something is missing, but rather that we've been conditioned to mistrust what we already have? This brings us to an uncomfortable question: why do so many of us feel so disconnected from ourselves in the first place? We tend to think of identity as something we must define, build, or discover. But at its core, identity is about recognition. It's about being able to look inward and say, I know this person, I see them, I value them. And yet, for many of us, this recognition is fleeting or absent altogether. Why? Because we've been taught, often unconsciously, to outsource that recognition to the world around us. We wait for others to validate our worth, for society to tell us what is good and desirable, for external markers of success to confirm that we are enough. Think about it: how often do you measure your value by how others treat you, by what they say, or by how much approval you receive? How much of your energy is spent chasing goals that aren't really yours, but are instead reflections of what you think you should be doing? And here's the crucial question: when was the last time you trusted your own voice over the noise of the world? The truth is, we're born with an innate sense of who we are. As children, we instinctively follow what feels natural and true to us. We cry when we're hurt, laugh when we're happy, and express what we need without hesitation. But as we grow, this natural connection to ourselves is often disrupted.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Maybe we were told that our feelings were inconvenient, or that our desires were unrealistic. Maybe we were punished for being too loud or too quiet, too emotional or too withdrawn. Gradually, we learn to suppress parts of ourselves in order to fit into the world around us. And so begins the slow erosion of self-trust. When this happens, we start to look outward for guidance. We rely on others to tell us who we are and what we're worth. And while this might bring temporary relief, it ultimately leaves us feeling hollow. Why? Because no matter how much approval or praise we receive, it can never replace the sense of solidity that comes from knowing ourselves. External validation is like a drug. It might feel good in the moment, but its effects wear off quickly, leaving us craving more. But here's the paradox: the harder we try to find ourselves through external means, the further we drift from the truth. The search becomes a trap, because it keeps us focused on the external when the answers we seek are internal. This is why so many of us feel stuck, lost, or perpetually dissatisfied. We're looking in the wrong place. So how do we break free from this cycle? How do we reconnect with the self we've spent so long ignoring or mistrusting? The first step is to acknowledge a painful but liberating truth: no one else can do this for you. No amount of praise, success, or love from others will ever fill the void if you don't know how to love and value yourself. This might sound daunting, but it's also incredibly empowering. It means that the answers you seek are within your reach. They've been with you all along. Now, let me ask you something. What would happen if you stopped trying to be someone else? What would your life look like if you stopped chasing the version of yourself you think others want to see, and instead embraced the version of yourself that already exists? Would you feel relieved? Scared? Free? These are important questions, not because they have easy answers, but because they force us to confront what we've been running from ourselves. Here's the thing: reconnecting with yourself doesn't require a grand epiphany or a dramatic transformation. It's not about finding yourself in the sense of discovering something new. It's about returning to what has always been there but has been buried under layers of doubt, fear, and conditioning. It's about learning to listen to your own voice, to trust your own feelings, and to honor your own needs. And this process begins with a simple yet radical act: paying attention. When was the last time you truly paid attention to yourself, not in the sense of criticizing or judging, but in the sense of listening and understanding? We spend so much time analyzing our actions, second-guessing our choices, and comparing ourselves to others that we rarely pause to ask, what do I actually feel? What do I actually want? These questions might seem basic, but they're often the ones we avoid the most. Why? Because they force us to confront the gap between who we are and who we think we should be. But here's the good news: the moment you start paying attention, you begin to close that gap. You start to see that the self you've been searching for isn't missing, it's just been waiting for you to notice it. And as you begin to notice, you'll also begin to trust. You'll realize that your feelings, even the uncomfortable ones, are valid. You'll see that your desires, even the ones that don't make sense to others, are worth pursuing. And you'll come to understand that your worth isn't something you have to prove, it's something you already possess. This isn't an easy process. It requires unlearning years of conditioning and confronting parts of yourself that you might have been avoiding. But it's also the most important work you can do. Because when you stop searching for yourself and start trusting yourself, everything changes. You become less dependent on external validation, less swayed by the opinions of others, and less afraid of being alone. You discover a sense of stability and peace that no one else can take away from you. And perhaps most importantly, you realize that you don't need to be anyone other than who you already are. So let me leave you with this: what if the search is over? What if the answer isn't out there but in here? What if all you need to do is stop looking and start listening? The truth is, you already know who you are. The challenge is learning to trust that knowledge. Are you ready to try? If we've acknowledged that the answer to who you are is already within you, then the question becomes, why does it seem so difficult to connect with it? Why do so many of us feel lost, as though we're wandering through life without clarity, purpose, or peace? The truth is, we're not lost, we're distracted. We've been pulled away from ourselves by a world that constantly demands our attention, a world that thrives on noise, comparison, and endless expectations. And unless we consciously step back, we become prisoners to this noise, mistaking it for reality. Think about your daily life. How much of what you think, feel, and do is truly yours? How often are your choices driven by what others expect, or what you've been told you should want? From the moment we wake up, we are inundated with messages from social media, advertisements, peers, family, and society at large about who we're supposed to be. Be more successful. Be more attractive. Be more productive. Be happier. Be everything, all at once. It's no wonder we feel disconnected. We've been conditioned to look outside of ourselves for a sense of direction, as though our worth depends on how well we meet these endless demands. But here's the thing: the more you chase after these external markers of success and validation, the further you drift from yourself. Because these demands are not about you, they're about the world's agenda. And the world's agenda has one goal: to keep you busy, distracted, and dependent. It wants you to believe that you are incomplete, that you need to achieve more, buy more, or change yourself in order to be enough. But what if I told you that none of this noise has anything to do with who you truly are? Let's pause for a moment and consider something radical. What if you stopped measuring your life by external standards? What if your worth had nothing to do with your achievements, your appearance, or what others think of you? What would remain? The answer is you just as you are, without the labels, the comparisons, and the fears. And this is where the real work begins, learning to strip away everything that isn't you so that you can finally see yourself clearly. This process is not about rejecting the world or isolating yourself from others. It's about reclaiming your attention and choosing where to direct it. Most of us spend so much time and energy focused outward on what others think, on what we lack, on what we need to fix, that we neglect the most important relationship in our lives, the relationship with ourselves. And this neglect comes at a cost. It leaves us feeling fragmented, ungrounded, and perpetually dissatisfied. But the good news is, this can change. You can begin to redirect your attention inward, where your true self has been quietly waiting all along. But how do we do this? How do we cut through the noise and reconnect with ourselves in a world that seems determined to pull us away? The first step is to recognize the noise for what it is: a distraction. The opinions of others, societal expectations, the endless comparisons, these are not reflections of your worth or your identity. They are just noise. And the more you recognize this, the easier it becomes to let go of the need to conform to it. For example, consider the role of comparison in your life. How often do you measure yourself against others, using their successes or failures as a benchmark for your own value? This habit is so ingrained that we often do it without realizing it. But here's the problem: comparison is a trap. It assumes that your worth can be quantified, that there's a hierarchy of value that determines who is better or worse, but this is an illusion. Your worth is inherent; it cannot be measured, ranked, or compared. The moment you stop comparing yourself to others, you free yourself from this illusion and create space to focus on what truly matters: your own journey, your own truth. Another form of noise that keeps us disconnected is fear of rejection, failure, or not being enough. This fear often manifests as a need to please others, to seek their approval, or to avoid conflict at all costs. But here's the paradox: the more you try to please everyone else, the less you please yourself. And the more you avoid conflict with others, the more conflict you create within yourself. So let me ask you, who are you living for? Are you living for the approval of others, or are you living for yourself? And if it's the former, what would it take for you to change that? The truth is, living for yourself doesn't mean being selfish or ignoring the needs of others. It means honoring your own needs, values, and desires instead of abandoning them in order to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. It means having the courage to say no to what doesn't serve you and yes to what does, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it disappoints others. Because at the end of the day, you are the only one who has to live with your choices. Your life is yours, and no one else can live it for you. This brings us to another important point: self-trust. Reconnecting with yourself is not just about knowing who you are, it's about trusting who you are. And trust is something that can only be built through practice. It requires you to listen to yourself, even when the world disagrees. It requires you to honor your feelings, even when they're inconvenient. And it requires you to make decisions based on your own values, even when they go against the grain. This is not easy, but it is essential, because the more you trust yourself, the less you need the approval of others. And the less you rely on external validation, the more freedom you have to live authentically. So let me ask you again, what would your life look like if you stopped chasing approval, stopped comparing yourself to others, and stopped living for everyone else? What would it feel like to trust yourself completely, to know that you are enough just as you are? These questions might be uncomfortable, but they are also liberating, because the moment you stop looking outward for answers, you begin to see that the answers have been within you all along. And this is the ultimate realization: you are not incomplete. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are whole, just as you are. The challenge is not to find yourself, it is to remember yourself, to reconnect with the truth you've always known but have been too distracted to see. And the more you do this, the more you'll realize that the search was never necessary. You've been here all along, waiting for your own attention. When we finally stop searching for ourselves in the world outside, we're faced with something that can feel even more daunting: the responsibility of being ourselves. This may sound simple, but it's anything but. To live as who you truly are without apology, without bending to the expectations of others, without hiding parts of yourself to make others comfortable, requires a kind of courage that most of us have been taught to suppress. Because being yourself fully and authentically is a radical act in a world that often rewards conformity. The world has a way of telling us, directly or indirectly, that who we are is not enough. Maybe it's the subtle disapproval of a parent when you didn't follow the path they envisioned for you, or the unspoken rules of a workplace that demand you suppress your creativity, or the fear of judgment that keeps you from sharing what you really think. Over time, these pressures accumulate, and without realizing it, we start to shrink ourselves to fit the molds others have created for us. We become smaller, quieter, safer versions of ourselves, believing that this is the price we must pay to belong. But here's the truth: belonging that comes at the cost of your authenticity is not belonging at all. It's a form of self-betrayal. And the longer you betray yourself in order to win the approval of others, the further you drift from who you really are. So let me ask you a question that cuts to the heart of this: whose approval matters more, yours or theirs? And if the answer is theirs, can you really call the life you're living your own? This is why self-trust is so crucial. Trusting yourself means valuing your own voice over the chorus of opinions that surround you. It means believing that your feelings, desires, and needs are valid, even when others dismiss them. It means standing firm in your truth, even when it makes you unpopular or misunderstood. This isn't easy, but it's the only way to live a life that's truly yours. Of course, this kind of authenticity comes with risks. When you stop performing for others and start being yourself, you might lose people. You might face criticism, rejection, or even ridicule. But here's the thing: when you stop pretending, the people who truly love and value you will remain. And the ones who don't, they were never really with you to begin with. They were with the version of you that you created to please them. And so, the question becomes, what's more important: keeping people in your life by being who they want you to be, or finding freedom by being who you really are? The answer may not be easy, but it is simple. Because at the end of the day, the only person you are guaranteed to live with for the rest of your life is yourself. And if you can't be at peace with who you are, no amount of external approval will ever make up for it. So stop searching, stop apologizing, and stop waiting for permission to be yourself. You've had the answer all along. It's time to trust it.